An old cowboy walks into the barber shop for a shave and a haircut, and he tells the barber he can't get all his whiskers off because his cheeks are wrinkled from age. The barber gets a little wooden ball from a cup on the shelf and tells the old cowboy to put it inside his cheek to spread out the skin. When he's finished, the old cowboy tells the barber that was the cleanest shave he's had in years. But he wanted to know what would have happened if he had swallowed that little ball. The barber replied, "Just bring it back in a couple of days like everyone else does."
Two friends lived in a communist country. The first friend asked, "Comrade, if you had two houses, would you give one of them to me?" The second friend replied, "Of course, comrade." The first friend was happy with this answer. He then asked, "If you had two cars, would you give one of them to me?" "Of course," replied the second friend. Overjoyed, the first friend then asked, "If you had two chickens, would you give one of them to me?" "No, comrade." The second friend said. Surprised and distraught, the first friend asked, "Why not, comrade?"
A policeman, patrolling near midnight at a local parking spot, saw a couple inside with the dome light on. There was a young man in the driver's seat reading a magazine, and a young lady in the back seat knitting. Stopping to investigate, he walked up to the driver's window and knocked. The young man looked up, cranked the window down, and said, "Yes, officer?" "What are you doing?" the policeman asked. "Well, sir, I'm reading, and my girlfriend is knitting a sweater." "How old are you, son?" the officer asked. "I'm 20, the boy replied, looking at his watch. "And in about 12 minutes, she'll be 18.
Robert, age 80, always wanted a pair of authentic Texas cowboy boots. So, seeing some on sale, he bought them and wore them home. Walking proudly, he sauntered into the kitchen and said to his wife, "Notice anything different about me?" Margaret, age 75, looked him over. Nope. Frustrated, Robert stormed off into the bathroom, undressed, and walked back into the kitchen completely naked, except for the boots. Again, he asked Margaret, a little louder this time, "Notice anything different now?" Margaret looked up and said in her best deadpan, "Robert, what's different?" "It's hanging down today, it was hanging down yesterday, it'll be hanging down again tomorrow." Furious, Robert yelled, "And do you know why it's hanging down, Margaret?" "Nope." "Not a clue," she replied. "It's hanging down because it's looking at my new boots." Without missing a beat, Margaret replied, "You should have bought a hat, Robert." "I should have bought a hat."
One day, two young brothers in Rome, aged 12 and 14, came home with a 20 and 50 euro note. Their mother asked them where they got all that money from. "Well, we were standing outside the brothel when a guy left," said the 12-year-old. "We told him that we knew where he had been, so he asked us not to reveal anything and gave us 20 euros. Then we followed the man," said the other boy. "And when he came to his house, we told him that now we also knew where he lived. Then he gave us another 50 euros and begged us to keep quiet. That's truly awful behavior," the mother replied. "You really should be ashamed of yourselves and feel sorry for the man. Off you go to confession in the church." The boys did what they were told and went to the church to confess and atone before the priest. After a while, they came back with 100 euros, because now they also knew where the man worked.
After a fancy dinner date, a young couple was walking back to their car, a beautiful Porsche Boxster. Upon arriving, they realized that they have found themselves locked out as they left the keys inside the vehicle. The man says to his date, "Hands me one of your hairpins, straighten it out, and I'll try to pick the lock." She does as he says, and after a good 10 minutes of fumbling, he fails. He then says to his date, "Dial the support line of the Porsche dealership, maybe they can send help." She does as he says again, and after 5 minutes of speaking on the phone, they were unable to request assistance as it was too late in the evening. The woman asks his date if he has any other ideas he can think of, and he replies, "None yet, but we better come up with one soon. The rain's starting to kick in, and we left the top down."
I hadn't put my own picture up on my dating profile, just a picture of my pickup. But that's okay because she just put a picture of her dog. I sent her a message, something almost clever like, "Your dog can ride in my pickup anytime." And she responded. We clicked pretty quickly, and we started chatting regularly. Every day, sometimes throughout the day. Slowly, we learned more about each other. Her dog's name was Daisy. My truck's name was Dodge Ram. She was a CPA. I was a beekeeper. And at this, she stumbled. "If we ever meet in real life, I want you to know that I could never date a beekeeper." But we were still far away from that point, so it was moot. But time went on, and we gradually became closer to that point. More personal information. What firm did she work for? Where my farm was. Names of relatives. Names of high schools. All the things that just come up in conversation eventually if you talk to someone long enough. But oddly, after all this time, neither of us had thought to send any pictures. Until one day I got a message from her. "I never thought I'd say this, but I really do want to meet you in person. I think we have a rare connection, and I don't want to squander it. I want to send you my picture, and I want you to send me yours, but I'm telling you, I can never date a beekeeper. I couldn't imagine a life without my bees. But I also couldn't imagine a life without her." Tentatively and reluctantly, I clicked on the image attached to her message. Then I saw her face. Now I'm a believer.
A boy gets engaged down south. Down south, a young man falls in love, and he rushes home to tell his pappy about his new sweetheart. Pappy sadly shakes his head back and forth and says, "Son, I hate to tell you, but in my youth, I sowed mashed wild oats, and that girl is your half-sister." Broken-hearted, the young man calls off the engagement. Months later, he eventually finds himself another belle, and he rushes home to tell his pappy. Again, pappy breaks the bad news. "Sorry, son, but in my youth, I sowed mashed wild oats, and she too is your half-sister." Devastated, the young man walks away with tears in his eyes. His mom sees him and asks what's wrong. The young man explains, "Every girl I take a fancy to, pappy says he sowed his wild oats, and they're all mash half-sisters." Mama says, "You hush up and pay that fool no mind, pappy ain't no kin o' yours." A father went shopping with his 3-year-old son. The child was crying loudly, and the father kept repeating calmly, "It's okay, Johnny, don't cry, Johnny, everything's going to be fine." When they reached the cashier, the child continued to cry louder, but the father kept repeating calmly, "We're almost done, Johnny, you're going to be home soon, Johnny, everything's going to be fine." Cashier, "Wow, it's amazing how you can speak so calmly to your son, Johnny." Father, "Actually, my son's name is George." "I'm Johnny,